There is a number floating around the internet right now that has broken every real estate agent's ability to make eye contact at open houses. The average American needs to earn $116,000 a year just to qualify for a median-priced home. The median American household earns $83,700. That is a $32,000 gap between what the country makes and what the country's houses cost. Not a gap in Manhattan, not a gap in Malibu, a gap in the middle, the dead statistical center of the entire nation. And if that gap existed in any other industry, we would call it a market failure. In housing, we call it Tuesday. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. This isn't a crash. Prices aren't falling. Inventory isn't flooding. Foreclosures are near historic lows. By every traditional signal, the housing market should be healthy, and yet nobody can move. Buyers can't afford to enter. Sellers can't afford to leave. Builders can't afford to build fast enough. And the entire system is just sitting there. Engine running, going absolutely nowhere, burning fuel. If you've spent the last 2 years refreshing Zillow, doing mortgage math in your head at 2 a.m., and feeling like the entire system is rigged against anyone who didn't buy in 2020, you're not paranoid. You're paying attention. And today we're going to walk through exactly how the American housing market broke itself in 5 years, who benefits from it staying broken, and what the actual math says you should do about it. Because the answer is not what the people selling you a mortgage want you to hear.
Let's rewind to where the damage started, because most people think this began with interest rates. It didn't. It began with a decade of not building houses. After the 2008 crash, home builders pulled back so hard that the entire industry essentially went into hibernation. Between 2010 and 2020, the country averaged roughly 990,000 housing starts per year. The historical baseline is 1.5 million. That is a deficit of 500,000 homes every single year for 10 straight years. 5 million homes that should exist and don't. But here's the part that never makes the headlines. The homes that did get built were overwhelmingly expensive. Builders figured out that building a $650,000 house on the same lot where a $280,000 starter home could have gone made them 3 times the margin. So the starter home, the 1,200 square foot entry point that entire generations used as a ladder into the middle class, was quietly discontinued. Production of homes under 1,400 square feet dropped over 80% from the 1970s to 2020. The bottom rung of the ladder didn't break, it was removed. Then 2020 happened. The Federal Reserve, in full emergency mode, cut rates to zero and started buying $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every month. By January 2021, you could get a 30-year mortgage at 2.65%, the lowest rate recorded since 1971. Suddenly, everyone who had been thinking about buying realized they could afford dramatically more house. Simultaneously, remote work went from a niche perk to the default setting for 18% of American workers. Millions of people looked at their overpriced apartment in a city they no longer had to commute in and made the same rational decision at the same time. They left. And all of them landed in the same handful of cities: Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, Tampa. Markets that were already tight suddenly had a stampede of buyers with pre-approvals, pandemic savings, and a desperate need for a home office that was not also a hallway closet. National home prices jumped 37% in 2 years. Austin climbed 61%, Phoenix 59%, Boise 53%. Houses were selling for $100,000 over asking, and bidding wars where showing up with your highest offer still wasn't good enough.
If you bought during that window, you accidentally made one of the best financial decisions of your life. That's not skill, that's a calendar. And for everyone else, what came next made everything exponentially worse. By mid-2022, inflation was running at 9.1%. So the Fed did the only thing central banks know how to do. They raised rates 11 times in 16 months. Mortgage rates went from 3.2% in January 2022 to 7.8% by October 2023. That is a completely different financial universe. Let me translate that into money, because percentages hide the pain. A $320,000 mortgage at 2.65% costs $1,293 a month. That same mortgage at 6.5% costs $2,023. That's $730 more a month, $8,760 more a year, $263,000 more over the life of the loan. Same house, same leaky faucet, same neighbor who mows his lawn at 7 a.m. on Saturdays. And the house itself cost $146,000 more than it did when the rate was low. You are paying more for the house and more for the money you borrowed to buy the house, both at the same time. That is not bad luck. That is a financial vice grip. Here's where most people expect prices to crash. Demand collapses, prices follow. That's how markets work. Except this one didn't, because something unprecedented happened on the supply side.
Right now, roughly 51% of all outstanding mortgages in America carry a rate below 4%. 20% are below 3%. If you locked in 2.75% in 2021, you are holding a financial instrument that no longer exists on this planet. The bank will not recreate it. The market cannot replicate it. Selling your house means voluntarily surrendering the cheapest money you will ever touch in your lifetime and replacing it with money that costs more than double. Federal Reserve researchers calculated the average financial penalty of trading your old mortgage for a new one at over $65,000. $65,000 just to leave. So the rational homeowner stays in the house that's too small, in the neighborhood they've outgrown, in the school district that no longer matters because the kids moved out, not because they want to stay, because a spreadsheet won't let them leave. This has suppressed an estimated 1.7 million transactions that would have otherwise happened. Active inventory is still 17% below 2019 levels. The market isn't crashing, it's frozen, and a frozen market at peak prices is arguably worse than a crash, because a crash at least creates entry points. A freeze just sits there, absorbing more of your income, while everyone waits for conditions that aren't coming this year. Let me introduce you to someone. Let's call him Daniel. He's 33, software developer in a mid-tier city, makes $95,000, which puts him above the national median by a comfortable margin. No credit card debt, credit score of 780. He has been saving for 4 years, skipped trips, drove the same car since college, built up $42,000 in a high-yield savings account. By every measure, Daniel is exactly who the housing market was designed for: productive, disciplined, patient. Here's what the market offers him in return. The median home in his city is $410,000. With 10% down, his loan is $369,000. At 6.5%, his monthly payment is $2,333. At property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and he's looking at $3,200 a month. Daniel takes home about $5,800 after taxes. Housing would consume 55% of it. He'd have $2,600 left for food, transportation, student loans, utilities, and whatever is left of his ability to feel like a human being with a life outside of a mortgage statement. The income required to comfortably buy the median home in his market is about $120,000. He makes $95,000. The gap is not a personal failing. It is a structural wall, and there are millions of Daniels standing in front of it right now.
And here's what that actually feels like, because nobody in the transaction ever talks about the feeling. It feels like watching a coworker your age close on a house and doing the math on whether their parents helped with the down payment. It feels like being told you're doing everything right by everyone except the one spreadsheet that actually matters. It feels like your discipline being punished by a market that rewards timing over effort. It feels like adulthood has a cover charge, and the bouncer keeps raising it. Now here's the part the real estate industry would genuinely prefer you skip over. Every institution in this transaction profits from your participation. The agent earns a commission, the lender earns interest, the title company earns a fee, the inspector earns a fee, the appraiser earns a fee, the insurance company earns a premium. Nobody in that chain earns a single dollar when you decide to wait. So every single one of them has a structural incentive to tell you the same thing. Now is a great time to buy. It is always a great time to buy. It has been a great time to buy during every bubble, every crash, every rate spike, and every affordability crisis in modern history. That phrase is not analysis. It is a sales script with a 40-year track record. Here's the honest math. If you are renting right now, investing the difference between what you'd pay in total housing costs and what you pay in rent into a low-cost index fund at historical returns, you are building wealth. In many markets, you are building more wealth than the person who bought. Renting is not failure. Buying a house you can barely afford because someone with a commission told you to is not success. It is a decorated cage.
And no, this is not 2008. The lending standards are tighter. The equity is real. Foreclosures are near lows. This market will not collapse the way that one did. But that is not the reassurance people think it is. A market that crashes creates opportunities. A market that freezes at the top just grinds forward, slowly eating purchasing power 1 quarter point at a time. If the math works, buy. Total housing costs under 28% of your gross income. A real down payment that doesn't drain your emergency fund. 7 years minimum time horizon. And a price to rent ratio under 15 in your market. Hit all 4 and buying is a solid decision. Miss any one of them and you are not investing. You are overpaying for shelter and calling it wealth building because everyone around you agreed to use that word. Your frustration is not irrational. It is the correct emotional response to a market that took a decade of underbuilding, flooded it with the cheapest money in history, then ripped that money away in 18 months and told you the resulting mess is normal. It isn't normal. Run your own numbers, trust what they tell you, and ignore every voice in the transaction that earns a fee from your signature, because the only person in the entire equation whose long-term financial interests are actually aligned with yours is the one watching this video right now.